We need to talk about idolatry because I've been seeing some different examples and also hearing from people who contact me on the channel, and they describe situations, but they don't even realize that they're in an idolatrous situation, that they've set themselves up as an idol for their children, for their spouse, etc. So let's talk about it. One of the reasons why it's so important for us to speak the language that God uses is so that we can understand what his expectations are. And I want you to consider this because I hear this quite frequently where people will contact me and they'll tell me, yeah, I'm kind of codependent. Like, that's okay. Like, oh, that's just part of your identity, huh? Like, that's just a thing. No, guess what? Codependent is idolatry. Either you're setting the other person up as an idol, or you're setting yourself up as an idol for that other person, or you're doing both. And by the way, if you're doing both, you're going to be held accountable for both. Not just setting them up, but also setting yourself up as a stumbling block to others to replace God with you. It's very serious, and I hope that you guys will really take this into consideration, because using things like, oh, well, this is mama's boy or daddy's girl, or I'm codependent, using that stuff is not okay, guys. That's the language of the world, and you know better. It's outright idolatry, and let me tell you the rule. The rule is that if God has designed a man, woman, or child to do a particular thing, you need not do that thing for them. You don't need to step in and start doing things like financially providing or anything else that they are supposed to be doing for themselves. And a lot of times what happens is parents do this for their kids, and they think, oh, at some point that kid's going to become an adult, and they never do because you're not letting them. And then that kid who never grew into an adult starts making kid decisions with adult freedoms, and their life becomes a mess. What are you going to do? Keep trying to get them out of that? Because there's going to come a point where you're not here. That should be the obvious thing, right? Like, pagans even know that. There's coming a point when you're not going to be here, and your child, your grown child, is going to need to be a grown-up. But more importantly is that they have a covenant that they need to fulfill with God. And if what you have taught them is that you will step in and take care of things that they're supposed to be sorting through with him, you are standing in the place of God. You are prohibiting them from understanding logical consequences to their behavior. And this is very serious in the sight of God. You haven't been given that child to do what you think is best. You've been given that child to go back and submit to God and ask him, how do you want me to raise your child? Who do you want me to be in this role that you've given me, in this trust that you've given me? I've shared with you before that, and I know that Tori doesn't mind me sharing this because Tori, like myself, is willing to be offered for the edification and building up of the church. There was a time, you know a little bit about the way that I grew up. I grew up really poor. I had a father who had a lot of money, but he didn't think that it was necessary to share that with his kids. Why would he do that? And so as a young adult and, a mother at 17, I didn't have anyone to fall back on. And that was a huge source of concern for me. And it was hard. It was really hard. And I never wanted Victoria to feel that. And I also had a lot of guilt for going and getting my doctorate and not being able to be there for, there wasn't enough of me, by the way, to work, raise a child, and get an education. But I had a lot of guilt over that, and no one was going to see any of that money that I made except for my daughter. That was my pagan way of thinking, right? That's how I was going to make up for not being there. Well, I'd been taking care of a lot of financial needs that my daughter needed to take care of. And this is not uncommon for parents to do this. And my daughter had been taking care of my emotional needs all her life. That poor little girl, because I was incredibly wounded. And we were stuck in a real codependent, idolatrous rut. And I remember that when we came together after a devastating blow up, we came together and we prayed, and we had taken some time apart, and we're really praying about what in the world happened. And we realized that we were in this rut, that she had been taking care of my emotional needs and I'd been taking care of her financial needs, and it just wasn't working for us. It wasn't right. It wasn't healthy, and it wasn't of God. And do you know that it was harder for me to step away than it was for her? It was harder for me to stop providing her financial needs than it was for her to stop receiving. And I had to sort through my own stuff. I had to sort through my own fears that my daughter was somehow in the same situation I was in, because she wasn't. She had support. She had a mother who loved her and was available to her and didn't say things to her like, I can't wait to get rid of you. She was not in the same situation that I was in. And because I had not healed from that stuff and acknowledged my own pain, I was working it out on my kid and ruining our relationship. And I remember her and her husband, now husband, had gone to like the dollar store and gotten a trash can. And she was so excited about that trash can. Listen, do you remember stuff like that? Like, do you remember buying stuff for the first time yourself with your own money that you earned? Did it matter if you got it from Crate and Barrel or the dollar store? No. And a lot of times when you have enough money to go buy the more expensive stuff, you don't even appreciate it. I appreciated things that I used to buy at the dollar store far more back when I had no money than I did when I would go to high-end stores and I had the money to spend. You know what would even happen when I would go and buy, like when I furnished my house, when I first bought my house, and I got all that furniture, and then I got the next catalog from that store, and I was like, I kind of like this though. And it was like all that, the feeling of like this novel furniture, and I just love it, and but I like that. That's better. Gross. I was robbing her. I was robbing her of that. And I even remember thinking, when she got that trash can, but you deserve better, but you deserve something, this and that. I was the one with the attitude problem. I was the one who needed to step back and grow up. So I want to tell you something. If you are engaged, if you are an idol in your child's life or in your spouse's life or in your boss's life or whoever's life, I don't care who, you need to step back and do your own work and figure out why it is that you're doing that. You need to return to God and let him deal with you. The rule is, you don't do for a man, woman, or child what God has designed them to do for themselves. You don't make excuses for people either, because at the end of the day, we've all got the same covenant, you guys. Stop giving handicaps to your kids and diagnoses and everything else. Stop doing that. You just might be creating that, and it just might be coming from your own issues. Now, let me tell you how to support one another without making yourself an idol, because we've had issues where people still have these ideas from counterfeit Christianity and identities from counterfeit Christianity in which someone tells them something that they need to be bringing to God, and then people go, I'll pray for you. Oh, wait a minute. You can see that person needs to go bring that to God, and you're not going to tell them to return to God. You're not going to tell them what they need to hear. You're just going to say, I'll pray for you. That is about as counterfeit as it comes. You need to open your mouth and be an offering. Be bold, be kind, be truthful. You're not helping anybody by keeping your mouth shut and knowing that person is doing what they're doing is incorrect. You know that. If you notice that someone is doing things incorrectly, stop staying quiet about it and acting like that's the kind thing to do. You didn't learn that from the word. You learned that from the world. What does the word say? The word says reprove once. If they don't listen, bring a witness. If they still don't listen, rebuke them. That's what the word says. Is that not kind? Is that not nice? Guys, you got to hold yourselves accountable for keeping this church clean. You see me do it every single day. And many of you will say, wow, you speak with such courage and boldness and everything else. I'm not doing this to replace your covenant. I'm doing it to demonstrate a living example of living in the covenant. All of you are saying that you want, build this lampstand, use me, Lord, have me serve you. Who's opening their mouths when it's not easy? What made you think that this was an easy thing for me to do or an easy covenant that we're fulfilling? Christ said it's not easy. He says it's outright hard for a righteous person to get into the kingdom of heaven. What was John the Baptist doing? Trying to win the popularity contest? Trying to win the Coddling Christian Award? I think we need to be redefining what we have believed being a Christian means. Because I'm not seeing people standing and saying, hey, I want to support you correctly. And I see that you're in idolatry. It'll be good for each of you to stand in truth and boldness, to open up dialogue with your children, with your spouses, whoever it is that you're in a relationship like that with. You need to step all the way back and then let God reintroduce you to the relationship. Do you remember when you left your parents' house? Like, I remember when I left my parents' house and I was living on my own for a while. Not that I was so good and so awesome, but I remember coming back and being like, man, you guys are messed up. You've been like this the whole time. You get perspective, okay? You need to pull yourselves out of incorrect situations, toxic situations, idolatrous situations, so that you can regroup and so that you can return to God, and then He will reintroduce you to your role. And with children, I understand that this can be, well, any relationship really, it can be very difficult. Rules have already been established in the relationship. That can be really tough. But God will move in the other person. That's the thing. It's like, in the world, you go to therapy and the therapist is like, oh, do this and do that. But only God can work in both of you at the same time and conform all things for good. You got to let Him do that, though. You can't be in idolatry. You got to speak the truth and let your kids know, hey, I'm struggling with this, so this is how I'm going to handle it from now on. I'm going to kind of step back with this because I really need to get a hold of myself. If you look at the plank in your own eye and what you're bringing to the situation, and then God deals with you on that and He heals you, you're going to then be able to help them to take the speck out of their eye. But the funny thing is, you're not going to do it at all in the way that you used to do. You're going to be sharing your testimony with them rather than trying to control them so that you can feel okay, or control circumstances so that you can feel okay. If you've been doing a particular thing for someone in your life, it's okay for you to kind of scale back the support, but you need to let them know what you're doing. Here's the plan. God has let me know that I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to be financially providing for you. So this is what I'm going to do. You got to have a plan or you're never going to stop engaging in that behavior. But you also can't just bring the hatchet down and tell people this is the way it's going to be. That's not fair. Or not tell them. Like, some people try to work on their boundaries without even informing everyone of what's going on. And I mean, everyone's like, what are we doing? What's going on here? That's not fair either. So be considerate of others and in the way that you're going to make a plan for both of you to scale back inappropriate support that you've been offering until you're no longer offering that support. It is important that you acknowledge that you took part in establishing these patterns. And if you're a parent, you did it. You did it, not them. You are at fault for that. And you need to go to God and He needs to instruct you. This is part of, remember that I tell you that God has a pattern. He's going to heal you as an individual. Then He's going to cause you to walk in the authority He's given you correctly. And then you can have a role in His church once you've proven worthy of a trust. You can't just say, well, I really messed this up and I don't think I'm so good at that. I'm not so good at the parent thing. Want to hire me as supervisor, God? You want me to supervise your church? I mean, come on, guys. He says anyone who's going to manage His church has to manage their own house, okay? So I'm not speaking, some psychobabble or something. I'm speaking on the word. And you can't manage your own house if you're not managing your individual house. You are a house. If you're not healed or in a process of healing with God, you're not going to manage your house well. What did you hear in my example with my daughter? You have to heal as an individual. Then He's going to move you to walk in the authority He's given you correctly. And then you can manage His house once you've proven worthy of that. But if you are not walking in the authority that He's given you correctly, if you're not worthy of the trust He's already given you, you'll never have a trust in His house. And I want you to know that's required in your covenant. You have to reach that point. That's what it means when God uses a body to tell you who you are. When He says each of you is a part of this body, a hand, an eyeball, an ear, everyone has a function. So if you don't have a function in the body, the church, you're not in the body. You're not in the church. You're not in the temple. You're not in the kingdom. So I know that a lot of you came from counterfeit Christianity thinking, oh, well, that's okay. I don't really want to be a disciple or an apostle or I don't want to be, I don't want any role or anything. I just want to be saved, right? Lazy, wicked servant. Not even a servant. It's a joke. How are you serving anyone? God's word says, Jesus said when He was here, if you want to be my disciple, you need to pick up your cross and follow me. If you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you're going to have to be reborn. If you want to be part of the body, you're going to have to function. Paul said to each one that we've been given a task. A disciple is a student of God. How can you enter the kingdom of heaven when you have not been a student of God, when you've not sat and received his ministry, when he's not been moving you to follow his laws and keep his decrees and to be cleansed through a process of repentance? How can you? And I think a lot of us intellectually understand these concepts and principles of what I'm saying, but don't put them into practice. Still in your heart, it has not permeated that you need to become different, that you have a task. And if you're not in it right now, you better get busy. You better get busy in your personal work. And if you don't know how to heal, there's a workshop on Mondays offered to you for free. There are 2 books on the homepage of this channel offered to you for free. You need to return to God and ask him if you should be utilizing those things, because you are not going to go to him and say, well, there was no help. No one was here to help me. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't even have, any kind of support. It cost too much money. There were too many things hindering me. No, there's nothing hindering you. I offer myself for free. That's what I'm here to do for another 2 years. And by that time, the torch should have been passed to you to go do what he set you apart to do. Better get busy, guys.